England, 1326. A queen and a rebel earl stand on the deck of a ship crossing the English Channel with 1,500 soldiers at their backs. They are lovers. They are traitors. By the law of the kingdom they have just left. And they are about to pull off one of the most audacious acts of regime change in the history of medieval Europe. In 2 months, they will have overthrown a king. In 1 year, that king will be dead, murdered, in circumstances so gruesome that the story was whispered about in horror for centuries. Their names: Roger Mortimer, the most dangerous nobleman in England, and Isabella of France, queen consort, daughter of a king, wife of a man she had come to despise. History calls her the she-wolf of France. She preferred to call herself the rightful regent of England. This is the story of the lovers who brought down a king, and what happened when the man who loved a queen forgot that she was always the more dangerous of the two. 1. The Broken King. To understand Isabella and Mortimer, you must first understand Edward II and why everyone wanted him gone. Edward II became King of England in 1307, inheriting one of the most powerful thrones in Europe. He was tall, handsome, physically strong. He had everything required to be a great king except the one thing that mattered most: judgment. Edward's great weakness was his favorites. He lavished titles, land, and power on men he was personally devoted to, regardless of their merit or the fury it provoked in the nobility. The first was Piers Gaveston, a Gascon knight of low birth whom Edward made Earl of Cornwall and treated as a near equal. The barons hated Gaveston with murderous intensity. In 1312 they seized him and executed him without trial. Edward wept. Then he made another favorite, Hugh Despenser the Younger. Despenser was everything Gaveston was not: cunning, cruel, and politically ruthless. Where Gaveston had been vain, Despenser was dangerous. He accumulated land and power through intimidation and legal manipulation, crushing anyone who stood in his way. Edward's military record was catastrophic. In 1314, at the Battle of Bannockburn, his army was devastated by Robert the Bruce's Scottish forces in one of the most humiliating English defeats of the medieval era. Scotland remained free. Edward's reputation never recovered. And then there was Isabella. Isabella of France had been sent to England at age 12 to marry Edward, as a political alliance between the English and French crowns. She was the daughter of Philip IV of France, one of the most powerful kings in Europe. She was educated, politically shrewd, and possessed of a dignity that made her treatment by her husband all the more intolerable. Despenser had stolen her lands, taken her children from her custody, intercepted her letters, humiliated her publicly. By 1325, when Isabella was sent to Paris to negotiate with her brother, the French king, she had already decided she was never going back. 2. The affair in Paris. In Paris, Isabella met Roger Mortimer. Mortimer was one of the most powerful marcher lords in England, the men who governed the turbulent borderlands between England and Wales. He was brave, ambitious, politically brilliant, and utterly committed to the destruction of Hugh Despenser. In 1322, Mortimer had led a rebellion against Edward and Despenser. He was captured, imprisoned in the Tower of London, and sentenced to life imprisonment. In 1323, he escaped, an extraordinary feat that no prisoner had accomplished before, by drugging his guards with wine laced with sedatives on the eve of a feast day, then climbing down the tower walls on a rope. He fled to France, where he waited for his moment. Isabella gave him that moment. Their affair began in Paris in late 1325, though the exact timing is debated by historians. What is certain is that by 1326 they were openly together, a queen of England and an exiled rebel lord living as a couple at the French court and planning an invasion. The scandal was magnificent and total. Edward II issued proclamations condemning his wife. The Pope demanded she return to her husband. Isabella's brother, the French king, told her she could no longer shelter in France. Isabella and Mortimer simply moved to Hainaut, modern-day Belgium, and secured military backing from the Count of Hainaut by betrothing Isabella's son, the young Edward, to the Count's daughter, Philippa. With money, ships, and 1,500 men, they were ready. The she-wolf of France was done waiting. 3. The invasion and the fall. On September 24th, 1326, the fleet landed in Suffolk. What followed was less an invasion than a collapse. Edward II's support simply evaporated. The nobility, who had endured 15 years of misrule and Despenser's greed, flocked to Isabella's banner. Towns opened their gates. Lords switched sides. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury declared for the Queen. Edward II fled westward with Despenser and a handful of loyal followers. In November, Despenser the Elder was captured and executed. Hugh Despenser the Younger was captured a few weeks later. His execution was spectacular in its savagery. He was drawn, hanged, castrated, disemboweled, and beheaded, a theatrical destruction designed to erase every trace of his influence. Edward was captured in Wales, brought to Kenilworth Castle, and presented with an ultimatum: abdicate or watch his son be disinherited and the kingdom descend into chaos. On January 20th, 1327, he abdicated. His 14-year-old son became King Edward III. Edward II was then transferred to Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire. On September 21st, 1327, he died in captivity. The official cause was given as natural causes, but the rumors that spread across England and have never been fully disproven were far more sinister. Contemporary accounts described an agonized scream heard from his chamber in the night. Later chronicles claimed he was murdered with a red-hot poker. Whether that specific account is historically accurate remains disputed. What is not disputed is that the most powerful people in England had strong reasons to ensure Edward II did not live to challenge his son's reign. Abdication removes a crown. Only death removes a threat. 4. The kingdom they ruled. For 3 years, Roger Mortimer and Isabella of France were the real rulers of England. The young King Edward III was 14 when he came to the throne. Mortimer controlled his movements, surrounded him with spies, and made clear that the boy king would reign but not rule. Mortimer had himself created Earl of March, a new and unprecedented title, and accumulated wealth and power that rivaled the king himself. But Mortimer made the classic error of every overmighty subject. He became too powerful, too visible, and too arrogant. He executed the Earl of Kent, Edward III's uncle, on a fabricated charge of treason. The nobility, who had supported the overthrow of Edward II, began to see in Mortimer exactly what they had despised in Despenser, a man who had seized the machinery of royal power for his own benefit. Edward III, growing into a young man of formidable ability, watched and waited. He was surrounded by Mortimer's agents, watched at every turn, his letters intercepted. The same treatment his mother had once endured from Despenser, he had not forgotten. 5. The fall of Mortimer and the end. October 19th, 1330, Nottingham Castle. A 17-year-old king and a handful of trusted allies entered the castle through a secret passage cut into the bedrock. They crept through the darkness toward Mortimer's chamber. Isabella heard them coming. "Fair son, have pity on the gentle Mortimer," she is said to have cried out. Edward III had no pity left. Mortimer was seized, taken to London, tried before Parliament, and condemned without being allowed to speak in his own defense. On November 29th, 1330, he was taken to Tyburn and hanged. His body was left to hang naked for 2 days, a deliberate inversion of his former grandeur. Isabella was not executed. She was Edward's mother. He could not kill her. But she was stripped of power, her lands reduced, and she spent the rest of her life in comfortable but definitive retirement at Castle Rising in Norfolk. She outlived her son's conquest of France, lived to see her grandson's birth, and died in 1358 at the age of 63. She was buried in her wedding clothes. Whether that was her choice, a final, complicated statement about the marriage that had defined and imprisoned her, or simply tradition, we will never know. She brought down a king and was buried as his queen.